My dear friends, today I want to share something very personal, something that shaped me deeply and tested my strength in ways I never imagined. Divorce is not just a legal separation, it is an emotional battlefield where you fight with yourself, your fears, your doubts, and your pain. I walked through that storm carrying not only the weight of my broken heart, but also the responsibility of staying strong for my children and for the people who look to me for hope. Loneliness after separation is not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone in a room or spending an evening in silence. It is a deeper kind of emptiness that follows you everywhere you go. Even when the cameras are flashing and the people are applauding and the world seems to think you are surrounded by admiration, you still feel like no one truly sees you or understands the storm within. It is a silence that grows louder when the night falls and the world quiets down and you are left alone with your own thoughts, replaying memories that once brought comfort, but now sting like wounds that refuse to heal. It is the ache of looking across the table and realizing there is no one sitting beside you who once promised to share your dreams. It is the walk down corridors that feel endless because the presence you once relied upon has disappeared, leaving only echoes that remind you of what was lost. The loneliness does not come only from the absence of companionship, but also from the shattering of expectations you once carried close to your heart. You believed in forever, and you believed in a shared path, yet suddenly the road bends sharply, and you are forced to continue without the hand you once held. And the world may tell you to be strong, to smile, to keep moving forward, but inside there is a hollow space that no words can fill. It is not that people around you don't care, it is that they cannot touch the place where the loneliness hides, because it is buried deep in your soul, in that sacred place where your dreams used to live. And so every day becomes a battle between the image you present to the world and the truth you carry inside. You might laugh in public yet cry in private. You might wave to a crowd yet feel utterly invisible. And that contradiction makes the loneliness heavier because no one sees the tears that fall in the quiet moments. No one hears the whispers of your heart when you ask yourself if you will ever feel whole again. The loneliness grows even more when you think of the future and wonder who will walk it with you, who will listen when the days are hard, who will hold you when the nights are long. And those questions linger with no clear answer, leaving you searching for comfort in your children's laughter or in the small moments of kindness that come unexpectedly. Still, the silence follows you and tests your strength every single day. It makes you reflect on who you are without the roles that once defined you. It pushes you to sit with your own pain and face the reality that no one else can fill the void for you. You must somehow learn to fill it yourself, and that is the hardest part, because healing from loneliness demands courage. It demands that you sit in the emptiness until you begin to discover that within that silence there is also space for growth, space to rediscover your voice, space to rebuild your heart. But before reaching that point, the journey feels endless and the loneliness seems unbearable. And you find yourself searching for meaning in places where, once you search for love, you find yourself clinging to memories of happier days, even though they pierce your soul. You find yourself longing for connection while simultaneously fearing to trust again. And this tug of war inside makes every step forward feel heavy. But you still take it because you know standing still will only deepen the ache, so you walk forward with the weight of loneliness pressing on your chest, hoping that somewhere along the way you will learn to transform that emptiness into a strength that will carry you into a future where peace might finally touch your heart. The fear of losing identity and purpose during a divorce is something that cannot easily be explained, because it does not only come from the end of a relationship, but from the unraveling of the life you thought you were meant to live. When you give so much of yourself to a role, to a family, to a duty that defines how the world sees you, you begin to tie your own sense of worth to that identity. And when it suddenly begins to fall apart, you feel as though the very foundation beneath you is crumbling. You begin to wonder who you are when you are no longer seen as part of something bigger than yourself. And the question of purpose lingers like a shadow that never leaves your side. It is a fear that whispers at night and greets you again in the morning, asking you if you are enough without the titles, without the role, without the person you once stood beside. For years you may have lived with a sense of certainty about who you were meant to be. The path seemed laid out, the responsibilities clearly drawn, and suddenly it all disappears, leaving you staring into a mirror where even your own reflection feels unfamiliar. You look into your eyes and wonder what lies ahead, and whether the world will still value you when the story changes. There is a deep sense of loss in this fear, because it is not only the loss of a relationship, but the loss of identity that came with it. You start to question your own choices, your own voice, your own strength, and sometimes you wonder if people only saw you through the lens of who you were with, rather than who you truly are. And this realization cuts deeply because it makes you feel as though your individuality was never acknowledged. And now in the silence of separation, you are faced with the task of rebuilding yourself from the fragments, but fear clings tightly, making you doubt whether you can ever do it. It becomes a constant struggle to silence the inner critic that tells you that your worth was tied to the past, that your purpose no longer exists, that you're adrift in a world that moves too quickly without you. And these thoughts weigh so heavily that they seep into your everyday moments. They turn joy into worry and turn stillness into restlessness. You may find yourself going through the motions of life, yet feeling detached as though you're only playing a role you no longer believe in. This fear does not only come from within, but from the eyes of others who look at you differently, some with pity, some with judgment, some with curiosity. And in those gazes you sense that they too are questioning what you are now without the identity you once carried. And that makes the fear grow louder, because it is not only your own doubt, but the reflection of society's doubt pressing against your heart. The journey through this fear is isolating, because no one else can answer the questions for you. No one else can tell you who you are meant to be. You are forced to confront the emptiness and carve out a new sense of self, even when you are trembling with uncertainty. Every day becomes a lesson in rediscovering small pieces of yourself you had forgotten. The laughter that is yours alone, the strength that emerges when no one else is there to hold you, the dreams that were buried under years of obligation. But reaching those realizations is slow and painful, because the fear of losing identity keeps pulling you back, whispering that without what you once had, you are incomplete. And so you fight a constant battle between letting go of the past and stepping into the unknown. The fear lingers at every step. But so does the faint hope that maybe within the loss lies the opportunity to discover not just who you were, but who you can still become. And that hope becomes the quiet force that pushes you forward even when your heart feels too heavy to move. The emotional pressure of public judgment during a divorce is something that weighs on every thought and every action, because it is not only about your private pain, but about the way that pain is observed, discussed and dissected by people who are not living it. When the world watches closely, there is no place to hide, and even the smallest expression, a smile, a tear, a pause, becomes a subject for speculation, and that constant scrutiny turns your grief into a performance where you are expected to remain composed while carrying a heart that feels shattered. It creates an unbearable pressure to present strength even when you feel weakest, because the fear of being misunderstood or ridiculed adds another layer to the sorrow. Instead of simply healing in silence, you are forced to navigate a stage where millions believe they have the right to your story. You hear their opinions whispered in the press, spoken in interviews, written in headlines, and each word feels like a weight pressing down on your chest. It makes you question yourself even more, because when you are vulnerable already, the criticism stings deeper and lingers longer. You start to feel as if you are not allowed to grieve openly. You are not allowed to break down. You are not allowed to break down. You are not allowed to admit that you are hurting, because the eyes watching you expect perfection, grace and composure at every turn, yet inside you know that you are just a human being who is breaking piece by piece. The contradiction between what people want to see and what you truly feel becomes unbearable. You smile when you want to cry, you wave when you want to disappear, you speak politely when your voice longs to crack under the weight of pain. And this performance becomes exhausting until it feels as though you are living two lives, the one in front of the world and the one behind closed doors. And even in your private moments, you still feel the echoes of their judgment. You replay their words, their assumptions, their false stories, and you begin to wonder if perhaps they see something you cannot. That doubt begins to eat away at your confidence until you feel smaller and smaller, as though your voice does not matter because the crowd has already decided who you are and what your pain means. But no crowd can truly know the depth of a broken heart. Still, the pressure is relentless, because every step you take outside becomes a stage where your strength or weakness will be measured. And sometimes you find yourself dressing the part of resilience while your soul cries for understanding. You carry the mask not because you want to, but because it feels like survival. Yet the longer you wear the mask, the heavier it becomes, and you begin to fear that you will be trapped behind it forever, unable to show the world your truth. The emotional pressure of public judgment is not only about the present, but also about the way it tries to define your future. People label you with names, with stories, with reputations, and those labels cling to you even when you're trying to move forward. It feels like dragging chains that are not your own, but are still bound tightly around you. And while you long for freedom to heal on your own terms, you are constantly reminded that your life is not just your own, it belongs in the eyes of others too. And this realization makes the healing slower, because you are not only mending from loss, but also fighting to reclaim your voice, to reclaim your dignity, to remind yourself that judgment does not define you. But during those vulnerable days, it's nearly impossible to separate yourself from what is said. So you carry the pain of two burdens, the pain of divorce and the pain of being seen through a lens that is not yours. And though you keep walking, the weight of that emotional pressure follows you everywhere, shaping your silence, shaping your tears, shaping the way you try to hold on to yourself in a world that constantly tries to take pieces of you away. The struggle of protecting children from pain during a divorce is one of the heaviest burdens a mother can carry, because while your own heart is breaking into pieces, you must somehow shield theirs from the sharp edges of that same reality. It is not simply about explaining what is happening, but about carrying their innocence carefully in your hands and trying to preserve the light in their eyes. Even when your own feels dimmed, you find yourself smiling through tears because you know they are watching you and they are learning from every expression you give them. You become their anchor, even when you feel like you are sinking, and that responsibility is both beautiful and unbearable. There are nights when you want to collapse into your own grief, but instead you read them a story, tuck them in gently, and whisper words of comfort you wish someone could whisper to you. You hear their questions spoken in the quiet moments, questions about why things are changing, about why there is so much silence, about why love feels different, and you must find answers that soothe without breaking the truth too harshly. You must walk the thin line between honesty and protection, between explaining life's realities and preserving childhood. And that line is one of the hardest you will ever walk, because as a mother you feel every tear they shed as if it were your own. Every shadow that crosses their face feels like a wound in your heart, and you carry the guilt that your struggles have touched their world, even if you know it is not your fault. Guilt becomes a constant companion whispering that you should have shielded them more, loved them more, fixed what was broken, so their little hearts would never feel the cracks. And so you overcompensate in every way you can, giving more hugs, more laughter, more reassurances, hoping that somehow your love will be enough to mend what life has taken away. Yet deep inside you know that no matter how hard you try, you cannot protect them from everything. You cannot erase the absence they will feel. You cannot silence the confusion that may linger in their minds. And this realization hurts more than any judgment or criticism from the outside world, because when it comes to your children, their pain becomes your greatest sorrow. You watch them closely for signs of sadness, and sometimes even when they smile, you wonder if the smile hides questions they are too young to ask. You find yourself constantly balancing strength and vulnerability, showing them resilience, while also teaching them that it is human to feel, to cry, to hurt, and that balance is delicate and exhausting. Yet you do it because their happiness becomes the purpose that carries you forward. The fear of their innocence fading too soon drives you to create moments of joy, even in the middle of chaos. You take them on walks, you laugh with them, you remind them that love is still around them, even if it looks different now. And in those moments you discover that children have a remarkable way of healing you too. Their laughter becomes a medicine for your wounds. Their hugs become the reminder that even in loss there is something worth living and fighting for, but still the weight of wanting to protect them never leaves you. It follows you in every decision, in every word you choose, in every decision, in every word you choose, in every smile you force for their sake. It is a quiet burden that keeps you awake at night, as you wonder what scars they will carry, what memories will stay with them, and you pray that when they grow older, they will remember not the sadness, but the love that surrounded them, because that love was always real, it was always fierce, and it was always the one thing that never broke, even when everything else around it did. The inner conflict between duty and personal healing during a divorce is one of the most consuming battles a person can face, because on one side there is the weight of responsibility, the expectations from society, the role you are meant to fulfill with grace and consistency. And on the other side, there is the quiet, aching voice inside you, begging for time to rest, to breathe, to grieve, to put yourself back together. It is as if you are being pulled in two directions, one demanding that you keep standing tall for the world, and the other pleading with you to allow yourself to crumble so you can rebuild. And this constant tension creates a fatigue that goes deeper than the body. It sinks into the soul. You find yourself performing the duties of your role with a smile that feels rehearsed, while deep inside your heart is heavy with sorrow. You attend the functions, you fulfill the obligations, you show the composure expected of you, but each step feels like it costs a piece of your strength. Yet you push forward because you know people are looking at you, people are depending on you to remain the image they believe in. And even when you want to withdraw, you remind yourself that duty does not pause for personal pain, but when the lights go out and the world looks away, that is when the weight of personal healing makes itself known. Your body trembles from exhaustion, your mind races with thoughts you cannot silence, your soul aches for moments of quiet, where you are allowed to feel without judgment. It becomes a cycle where the day belongs to duty and the night belongs to grief, and neither gives you rest. You are caught between the need to be strong for others and the need to be soft with yourself. And every time you lean toward one side, the other calls out, reminding you that something is being neglected. If you give too much to duty, you feel as though you're betraying your own healing, denying yourself the chance to recover. But if you give too much to your healing, you feel as though you are betraying your own healing, denying yourself the chance to recover. But if you give too much to your healing, you feel as though you are betraying those who rely on you, letting them down when they expect you to rise, This inner conflict becomes a storm that never quiets. It makes every decision heavier because you're constantly questioning whether you are doing the right thing, whether you are balancing enough, whether you are allowed to choose yourself even for a moment. And that questioning drains the spirit because healing requires freedom. It requires time and space. Yet duty demands sacrifice. Duty demands sacrifice. It demands your presence even when your heart is absent. And so you live in a paradox where both sides of you are unsatisfied. You cannot give fully to either, and the guilt of that failure lingers like a shadow. The duty whispers that you must remain graceful, poised and committed. The healing whispers that you must be raw, vulnerable and true. And both voices are loud, both voices demand, both voices refuse to quiet. And so you walk through your days with a mask of strength, and through your nights with the truth of fragility. You learn to compartmentalize, to hide your wounds while fulfilling your tasks. But in the stillness you wonder how long you can survive like this, how long you can carry both worlds without collapsing. And sometimes the weight makes you feel as though you are living two separate lives, one for the world and one for yourself. And in the process you lose sight of where they meet. Where the true self lies, the conflict steals your peace because you cannot surrender to either side fully. You are always torn, always second-guessing, always burdened by the knowledge that neither duty nor healing is being honoured as they deserve. And still you keep moving, still you keep trying, still you keep holding the pieces together, because that is what strength looks like in the middle of this battle, not the absence of conflict, but the endurance to live within it, even when every part of you longs for release. The silent battle of self-worth and acceptance during a divorce is one of the most painful journeys a person can endure, because when a relationship that once defined so much of your life comes to an end, you are left questioning not only the bond that broke, but yourself in the process. You begin to wonder if you were ever enough, if your love was ever truly valued, if your presence mattered as deeply as you believed it did. And those questions echo in your mind until they feel like a constant companion. You carry them with you when you wake and when you try to sleep, and they do not let you rest because they dig into the very core of your identity. Self-worth becomes fragile as you recall moments when you gave everything of yourself, yet it still was not enough to hold things together. You remember the sacrifices you made, the times you put your own happiness aside, the ways you poured love from your heart unconditionally. And yet despite it all, you were left standing in the ruins of something that was supposed to last forever. And so you begin to internalize the pain, telling yourself that perhaps you failed, perhaps you were lacking, perhaps the problem was something within you. And this silent battle grows heavier with every passing day because it is not fought in the open. It is hidden behind smiles, behind formalities, behind the image of composure that others expect to see. But deep inside, there is a voice whispering doubts that you cannot silence. Acceptance becomes just as hard because when the world sees you through its own lens, it attaches labels, assumptions, and judgments that are not your truth, yet they cling to you, and you begin to fear that those outside opinions define who you are, and it hurts because you want to believe in your own value, but the noise around you tries to convince you otherwise, so you fight quietly to reclaim yourself, to remind your own heart that you are worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of peace. But the process is slow, and every step feels uncertain. There are moments when you look into the mirror and do not recognize the person staring back at you, moments when you question if you will ever feel whole again, and moments when you wonder if you will always carry the label of someone who was left behind. Yet within this painful silence there are also flickers of strength, because even as you doubt, you are still fighting. Even as you feel unworthy, you are still searching for your value. And that struggle itself shows that you have not given up. The battle with self-worth is not about never doubting, but about continuing to seek the truth of your worth despite the doubt, and acceptance becomes not about agreeing with the way things unfolded, but about finding peace within yourself. Learning to accept that you cannot control the past, you cannot change the choices that were made, but you can begin to embrace the person you are becoming through the pain. The acceptance you long for is not from the world, but from within, the acceptance of your scars, your resilience, your humanity. And while the silence of this battle feels lonely, it is also where you start to discover pieces of yourself that you forgot. You learn that worth is not tied to another person's ability to love you, but to your own ability to stand, to heal, to grow, and to love yourself again. And though the path is long and filled with shadows, each step toward that acceptance is a quiet victory. Each tear shed in honesty becomes a release, and each small realization that you are still enough, even now, becomes a light that slowly begins to guide you out of the darkness.